Eat human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
C'est tu apogeo.
ピーク人間
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm here recording out of Austin, Texas, where I'll move shortly, maybe in March. My lease runs up in LA. I can't wait to get out of LA and move to the land of the free, Texas, where the new animal base Mecca is forming. It's a place to be. Get here now while you can. Anyway, we have a great episode for you today that we did live in LA with Max Lugavere. This is in our new Sapien studio. Please subscribe to the Sapien podcast now. I'll wait. Just pause the podcast, subscribe to Sapien, and you can check out our old episodes there. We did a short season of 10, and now we're going to have a new season with some great guests live in our great studio. You should also subscribe on YouTube to the Food Lies YouTube account, and you can see our super high quality 4-camera HD setup with guests that we're going to be having in studio with Dr. Gary. This is a different episode. We have Dr. Gary involved. We're doing it in person. This episode will also go out as the Sapien podcast in a week or two. And you can, find it on YouTube. We'll have a lot more stuff going on the Sapien podcast. Short episodes, long episodes, really interesting stuff. So please subscribe there on your podcast app. Max Lugavere is a filmmaker, health and science journalist, and the author of the New York Times bestseller Genius Foods, published in 8 languages around the globe. He is also the host of the #1 iTunes health podcast, The Genius Life. He has also recently just written his new book, The Genius Life. Lugavere appears regularly on The Dr. Oz Show, The Rachel Ray Show, and The Doctors. He has contributed to Medscape, Vice, Fast Company, CNN, and The Daily Beast, and a bunch of other mainstream news outlets like the New York Times. He's done all kinds of things. I love it that he's going mainstream, getting the word out there. He's a great guy, and he's right here in my area, in Venice, in my area that won't be my area for long. But on to another few quick things. This podcast is possible not through advertisers, but through the community, through our own products and services that we believe in and we offer, and we don't take any outside funding, any outside money from anyone. We do it all here. And I've turned down a lot of advertisers so that I can stay independent. And it only works if we're supported by the community. So you can support us for free by giving this podcast a review on iTunes or the podcast app, by sharing with a friend and family. Also, just start back at episode 1 to catch all the great episodes. You can also go to Nose to Tail. Our new products came out today, finally. The beef tallow skincare line, the seasonings with no sugar, no fillers, no anything. The hats were a secret one I didn't mention. We have some cool hats. One has a steak on it. It's just a fat steak, and it's a custom designed patch that's woven and hand sewn on. We have the steak hat that's the word steak. And then we have the nose to tail hat, which is a leather custom patch that's really cool. Each hat has 3 different varieties. It's great. Goes along with the skincare line, all the beef tallow, natural skincare products, lip balm, soap, and skin food. We're still working on our deodorant and our hair care product. You can get these at nosetotail.org. You can make yourself a little box. You can also add in the seasonings. Like I said, all natural, small batch, no fillers, no sugar, just pure herbs and spices. Really great blends. The Thai one is so good on lamb. The dill and ranch one is amazing. Just add some sour cream or any yogurt or anything, and it tastes like the best ranch you've ever had, but without any sugar or soybean oil or funny business. Each one is good. You have to try them all, and you can use them for each type of meat. So check that out at nosetotail.org. And of course, all the meats there, the primal beef with the organs, the low omega-6, pork and chicken, all that delivered to your door. You can order them all at once, but they ship separately. So just know you can get free shipping on each if you order enough, but they will ship separately. So super excited about that. I've spent months and months working with great people to come out with these new quality products. Check those out now. That's about it. Sapien.org, the program, the tribe, that's there. I won't go into all the details. You've probably heard about it enough, but go to sapien.org if you're serious about losing weight and want to make some lifestyle changes, and join the tribe to get the show notes, the extra bonus episodes, and all that good stuff. Now let's get to the show with Max. What's up, everyone? We're back for the Sapien podcast. We got Dr. Gary here.
Hey, everyone.
And our guest today, Max Lugavere. Hello.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Brian, Dr. Gary, what's going on?
Max.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
we're excited. You're one of our first few guests in our new studio. It's nice to see people in person for once and not just be on a Zoom chat. And yeah, I think you're kind of on a similar path to me, right? So we don't know each other extensively, but we kind of have the same general story. I know that you lost your mom to Alzheimer's. So did I. We got interested in health because our family's health. We both actually spoke at that Foodscape conference in Chicago.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I spoke at that last year.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we're not doctors that have gotten into this world and try to be communicators, I guess, and let people know about how important diet and lifestyle is. So excited to talk to you. You really have kind of the same view as us on how to live, and we call it the Sapien diet and lifestyle. And I guess yours more the genius diet and lifestyle.
Well, there's probably a lot of similarity. Hopefully we can find some differences. But yeah, I got motivated to engage with this topic. Actually, the story with my mother ended up being a lot darker than I think how many people perceive it, just based on sort of my other appearances on podcasts and whatnot. My mom actually, she had a form of dementia for many years that she struggled with, which was very hard, very traumatic. And that really is what motivated my work. But then it was it was Labor Day of 2018 when my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. And that basically set off a 3-month timer, after which, my mother was taken from me. And it was the hardest thing that I ever had experienced. And I was just talking before we got rolling with Dr. Gary, that going through something like that changes you in a way that nothing else can. It really kind of gives you a different perspective on things that is at once, it's the most tragic thing that a human being can go through. And it's not something that I would wish upon any friend or enemy or what have you, but it's also in many ways a privilege, because it just kind of gives you a new perspective, and it really kind of highlights in a major way what matters. And it allows you to then take that sort of insight and to be able to, from that place, address other people. So when you have that plus a platform, I think it really kind of sets you up to be an agent of change in a way that that is just a lot more effective than coming at it from say like not having that experience.
Well, yeah, that's part of the thing is I didn't have some big health problem.
Yeah.
It's just, and so many people, they go throughout their life and they don't ever wake up to health. And so I got woken up early. I was about 30, and I actually lost my dad as well to prostate cancer.
Oh God, yeah. So
it's on all sides of me. So yeah, it is fortunate in that way where I got woken up. I took things seriously and I made some changes, and everything has gotten better since. So
that's amazing. Yeah, it's just like that's like real sickness, and I know you guys obviously both can totally relate to it, but seeing that, it's just like you don't want anybody to have to go through that. It's the most barbaric thing. It's inhumane,
When you say real sickness, you mean like the malignancy, the cancer, plus like dementia or brain disease, like the how dramatic those kind of symptoms and the situation is. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah. Just like the dramatic decline, just the rapid deterioration of witnessing such rapid deterioration of a human being. Like, you work in hospice, right? So like cachexia, for example, it's not something that that's not in the vocabulary of a civilian. What is that? Rapid muscle wasting. Have you ever seen somebody with cachexia? It's like, you have, I know.
Yeah, many people, but I think something that, not to start off the podcast too morbid, but I think it's really hard to talk about end of life. It's really hard to talk about death because it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
But it's so important. And especially in these times where I think so much of what people's fears and struggles is that they're fully disconnected from life, which is death. Like death is such a part of life that if we keep pulling people away, not showing people what dementia looks like, what cachexia looks like, what it looks like to spend 3 months in bed and what happens to your muscles and your brain, and you create like fear and a disconnect from yourself. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but at least this is what I went through. And I really was like faced with end of life in residency, was like an appreciation for what we do have. and like an appreciation for the power of a lifestyle change, right? Like you wrote a book about food, like how powerful it is to just change parts of your diet and see that health. And, I think that's like the most important thing about what I do is it really reminds me of what we're doing here. Like we're not here to tell people like about end of life. But we are here to tell you you can change your life. Mm-hmm. You can live a beautiful life, a genius life, a sapient life. Like you can live an amazing day-to-day life. And sometimes you need to see death to remember how important that is.
Yeah. But the key is to start today.
Right.
To start the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining.
Oh yeah.
Not when you're already, in the midst of a torrential downpour, right? That's a famous JFK quote.
I love it.
So that's why the work that you guys do is so great, and that's why I've been so motivated to help kind of spread the gospel of what it means to live and eat healthily. And there's there's nuances to that conversation. Mm-hmm. Some people, there's debate about various sort of like micro points within that, but I think generally it's not that difficult. The problem is today we're just inundated with exposures to whether it's toxic industrial chemicals or ultra processed junk foods that that are hard to eat in moderation, or just an endless stream of digital video distraction just pulling us back to the couch despite all of our best efforts to get up and move a bit and maybe even go to the gym. So there's a lot working against us, but if you can kind of see the matrix, I think, then it becomes a lot easier to act.
So you're like Neo, you're seeing all the
I'm trying to be the Morpheus for people.
Ooh.
There's many Morpheuses in the space. I'm not the only one, but like for my followers, I'm trying to kind of help give people that information. Yeah.
Well, the modern society is working against us. That's all we need to do is expose it. Because some people go around life and they don't understand all the modern norms every single one of them is going against your human nature and is all the problems. Like any problem we have, you can point to the modern norm, right? And so we're just, I guess in our space, it's a kind of this ancestral space is trying to show people go back to live like a human again. And I love how you said, let's see if we can find some things we can disagree on even, because that's what we try to do with Sapien. That's what I try to do with the film is not just go down one way of thinking. So I would love if we could go into your idea of what this framework looks like to resist modern norms and live like a human again. And then maybe we could kind of break it down because as we say on this podcast, to be scientific, we have to look at both sides. And so I'd love to sort of look at another side, even with like carnivore versus more plant-based. And, we're both friends with Paul Saladino.
Yeah.
And so maybe we could, I think Sapiens, more on the meat heavy side. So I guess we'll just start with the food then. So what is your sort of principles on food?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely would consider myself carnivore adjacent. I very much am aware of the nutritional value of meat. And, full disclosure, I consume meat. I really enjoy it. I think it's important. There's this call now for researchers to, in their disclosures, not just disclose their financial affiliations, but the diets that they personally adhere to.
Really?
Yeah. There's been this sort of movement to kind of, it's really not happening like en masse yet, but I think it's worth it because when you read a paper, right, that seems to somehow promote, despite the fact that maybe the study was observational or a small study, that whatever the dietary pattern it's looking at or seems to have provided the most benefit happens to be, I think it's still important to know the dietary pattern of the researcher, right? Because diet is something that it's like one of the few areas where we ingrain it. It becomes ingrained in our identities, and so for that reason, it has the ability to bias our stances on things, and that the same could be said for science and research and things like that. But yeah, I definitely know the value of properly raised meat. I think where I diverge from them is that I also think that plants are great. Certain minerals and nutrients in plants might not be as bioavailable as those in meat, but for example, I talk a lot about the value of dietary carotenoids, like compounds like lutein and zeaxanthin, which are found most abundantly in dark leafy greens, and their value for protecting neural tissue. So, it's most lutein and zeaxanthin are most well known for their ability to help prevent age-related macular degeneration, right? But we now know that those same compounds can accumulate in neural tissue, and it seems to provide a protective effect to our cognition as we age. And there was also a randomized controlled trial performed out of University of Georgia, small trial, but found that college students that supplemented with 12 milligrams of combined lutein and zeaxanthin a day had a boost in their visual processing speed, which I think is super interesting considering that young people are already thought to be at the peak of their cognitive ability. So those compounds are just, you'll find them abundantly in dark leafy greens because they're pigments. So green, yellow plants rich in these compounds. I also, think it's pretty hard to find magnesium, which we know is super important in animal foods. Vitamin C is something that I think is important. I know there's some debate about how much vitamin C you actually need if you're on a carnivore diet.
Raw liver, yeah.
Yeah, raw liver. But I mean, I'm not about to start eating raw liver. Sorry,
I'll eat
Paul.
it. But yeah, if we're talking about the rest of America, no, it's not going to happen.
Another thing, I recently did a deep dive into nitric oxide, which I think is super, super interesting. And, when you look at the top source of dietary nitrate, it's plants. It's dark leafy greens, it's arugula, beets, celery. Yeah, celery is a great source. You chew these plants, and the bacteria in your mouth literally create nitric oxide, which then gets recycled through your saliva, and it reduces blood pressure. It has a vasodilation effect. It boosts blood flow. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule. It boosts insulin sensitivity. So these are all the many benefits, I think, that you get. And there are countless others of eating plants, I think. Now, yeah, we live in a time where we have widespread immune dysfunction, right? And I don't think there's a really clear definition for what that is, but I guess for the sake of this conversation, we could say active autoimmunity. If your body is attacking itself, then you obviously have a dysfunctional immune system, right?
I also consider metabolic disease as an immunocompromised state of sorts because, and again, the current pandemic highlights this. If you have high blood sugars, if your blood pressure's all over the place, if you have inflammation from all this extra fat in your body, your immune system is compromised.
Yeah.
Just to add to it.
Yes. Agreed. But the whole call to eliminate plants, I find that anecdotally, you see the most benefit experienced by people who have these crazy autoimmune conditions, right? So yeah, for those people, it makes sense that cutting out certain plants would help them to experience a reprieve in symptoms. But for people who are robust, I think there shouldn't be any reason to remove them. In fact, that's where I think you'll actually experience that xenohormetic effect, right? Of plant compounds actually enhancing your health as opposed to confusing an already confused immune system.
Well, yeah, I think part of what the thing is, I'm a little anti-carnivore, even though I'm very close to carnivore.
You're very close, but you're anti.
Yeah. I always want to push back against that, and I always want to do that on social media. And people are like, I post a meal, and they're like, "Oh, too much green, bro." I'm like, okay, you got to calm down.
Yeah.
Just because Sean Baker told you green is bad doesn't mean that green is bad, right? So I want to go into more of just why it's not bad. There are some benefits. Dr. Paul Saladino, writes all about in his book and all these things. Every single plant thing you can get from plants can be getting from animals, but it's it's not in a high enough amount, even though animals are more bioavailable. But so what are some of those other things? Because fiber, maybe we don't need fiber, right? But,
yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot of strawmanning going on. And I love Paul. He's a brilliant guy. And I also think Sean's a brilliant guy. And I agree with 99% of the things that they post on social media. But nobody I think is arguing that meat isn't, and nose to tail consumption, all this stuff is nobody's arguing that that's not the way to go. Those are all super healthy. I think the point is that people who are healthy, who are not immunocompromised, should be able to consume plants. And not just filler on the plate. Plants can actually have a beneficial effect. Nobody's saying that we should be eating more grains, more fine grains, or anything like that. That's not what I think the most thoughtful rebuttals to carnivores are suggesting that we should be, they're not suggesting that we should be eating more grain products. They're suggesting that like dark leafy greens are fine, or cauliflower is totally okay, berries, fruits, things like that. The sweet potatoes, totally fine. But yeah, I think it's funny, and I do agree with a lot of what they say. I think sometimes you see a lot of people also, and this is just my own thinking, is that there's a lot of people who embrace the carnivore diet, and these people weren't raised eating vegetables that tasted delicious, So they have like these sort of these like palates that are just in like stasis from the time that they were 12, and their moms fed them, broccoli that didn't taste very good or something like that. And so they're like, all vegetables are terrible. But I love the taste of vegetables. And it's,
Let's get some grass-fed butter on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just throw some grass-fed butter on it.
Two questions. So two ideas that I always teach my patients when sounds like we're very like-minded when it comes to plants. I will add that I think carnivore, at least in my world, is a tool to treat disease. It's not a lifestyle per se that I would recommend someone do. But it's really great for someone with an autoimmunity, at least as a trial, as like an ultimate elimination diet, something like that. That's kind of where I utilize it in my practice.
Yeah, like a therapeutic diet. I totally get it.
Because it puts you into ketosis for the most part. Like it does a lot of great things. Question about plants. So two things that I always teach is you got to watch your source, right? So just like we talk about pasture raised animals and organic and all this, it's very important to realize how much pesticides, and you already mentioned the toxicity of all these chemicals. So I do worry about some of my patients that are really plant heavy, getting too much toxin, right? And so rather than poo-pooing the plants, I educate them on like the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, which I'm sure you're familiar with, or just in general, like, hey, support local farmers. Go to your local, farmers market. Support it. Yeah, it costs a little more money, but it's like what you're putting in your body. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on how important that is. And then the second question to let you talk is, I really love and encourage folks to think about fruits and vegetables as low sugar fruit. So your olives, your avocados, like things that people think of as vegetables but have seeds that those are actually fruit, right?
Yeah.
And because I see so many people, especially like in from certain ethnicities, I'm Russian. In Russian culture, we eat a lot of sweet fruit. And like you can really spike blood sugars eating a ton of like watermelon and banana and tropical fruits. So curious on those two issues.
Yeah. I think quality is really important. When it comes to organic, I definitely buy, if you're eating the peel or the whole, leaf or what have you, then I try to buy organic. But I also, I think it's important to recognize that not everybody has access to organic and not everybody can afford organic. And also industrial organic is really not super great either. There's a lot of cross-contamination that occurs. So to put organic, I think, on this, on like a pedestal, I think we need to be a little bit more realistic about it. I do spend, I vote with my money, and I spend money. I spend more money to buy organic. And I do think it's valuable. We know that organic has lower concentration of synthetic pesticide residue. Organic produce has been shown to contain, I believe it was 50%, up to 50% less cadmium, which is a toxic heavy metal. And so, I don't think, organic is a panacea. There's a lot of ultra processed junk foods that have that organic certification slapped on it in the supermarket. But quality I think is definitely important. And then when it comes to fruit, I agree. Low sugar fruit is the way to go. Avocado is a low sugar fruit, non-starchy vegetables. But I have to be honest, I love a good Honeycrisp apple. You're not going to be able to keep me from that. When they're in season, especially.
So seasonality is
huge. I think is important. Yeah. I had an experience recently. So over the course of the quarantine thing, I took up boxing, and normally I'm super into resistance training. And when I typically lift weights, I'll do like a heavy set, and there'll be like a 1 to 2 minute gap in between in between my sets. With boxing, it's super high intensity anaerobic work, and then you only get like a 30-second break in between rounds. And what I noticed, so I used to work out primarily fasted because I enjoy the sort of like hormonal and neurochemical cocktail when you're fasted. I find it gives me a lot of energy in the gym. But with boxing specifically, first thing in the morning fasted, I found it that I was like bonking way quicker.
Gassed.
That it was like really difficult for me to make it through without just feeling completely gassed, without having some kind of food beforehand, and not just food, but carbohydrates, you know? So I went to the supermarket and I bought just to test, like just to do like an N of 1 test. I bought a bunch of bananas and I started eating like a banana before with like some peanut butter and a protein shake. So like a combination, you know, carbohydrates, 30 grams of carbohydrates from the banana, protein shake, and some peanut butter before that workout. And I got to tell you, I mean, in my own N of 1, you know, anecdotal experience, just eating that before boxing, I felt like superhuman compared to the way that I was feeling before going into that workout, you know, before. So I think it's like, you know, case by case basis. If you're just sitting around all day, then, you know, reach for the lower sugar fruits. But if you're active and you're working out, you know, I don't think that there's any harm in eating whole fruit in moderation, even if that fruit happens to be sort of on the sweeter side of the spectrum. Am I saying to eat an entire tropical pineapple every single day in the context of a sedentary lifestyle? No. But if you're remotely active, you know, I probably eat 0 to 2 whole fruits a day. And that's like, and I say 0 because it's not a, you know, it's not
There's a lot of days where you don't have any.
Yeah, there's a lot of days that I don't have any. But if I want to eat a Honeycrisp apple, I'm going to let myself eat the Honeycrisp apple.
You're making me hungry for
That's
now.
great.
They're freaking good.
Yeah.
Well, this is good because we're talking to, I guess, the bulk of America, which is not in good shape and does have metabolic problems. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of nuance, and of course, yeah, there's way too many details to get into. So we have to always be nuanced on this. But I like that you brought up the resistance training stuff. If we move to more lifestyle things, I think jogging's sort of a waste of time.
Yeah.
It's great if you like it. Gary likes to do it.
I was going to
Clear
start
your
arguing.
head.
Jogging? Yeah.
Clear your head.
Well,
but you say your case for it, and then we'll talk about resistance training.
I've been saying this to patients lately, like, especially people that are kind of sick, like we're talking metabolically damaged, like the nutrition is the heart of it. You're going to do most of the work, I think, with the food and like the food patterns. I know you talk about that a lot. I love it. Exercise is really important for your brain.
Yeah.
And I know you talk about that, but like, I just really want to emphasize that, yes, if you want to get muscles and you want to get your 6-pack, and even for your heart, it's important to get that exercise. But for your brain to chill out, oftentimes I'm running in the sun, I'm getting my sun, I'm getting some fresh air. So I just really emphasize this idea that you're not working out to get buff, or even sometimes for your heart. You're working out for your brain so that you feel like mentally fresh, and then you can make better choices with your food. So jogging for a lot of people, Brian, is a meditation. For me, it's the like couple minutes in and I'm like, I don't know what just happened.
Wow.
And that's a blessing. And I know for a lot of people, they don't know about the runner's high, or they're like struggling for it. And but for a lot of people it is. So that's my only caveat to the running is like, yeah, it may not be as efficient a workout, but it might have so many other benefits.
Yeah. I think if you like running, you should keep doing it. I sort of have a love-hate relationship with it. When I get into the rhythm of doing so, if I'm not like running regularly, that first run to me is torture. I have to do it a few days in a row to really sort of feel like my body is getting into the groove of it. But generally speaking, I just don't feel like my body is like made to run the same way that I feel like I'm biomechanically not really going to have an advantage in a deadlift competition because I'm like tall and, you know, same thing in my opinion for running. I tend to love resistance training instead, but I think whatever form of exercise you're willing to do, you're right. It is medicine for the brain. I think that there's been a bias in the medical literature for aerobic exercise only because it's a lot easier to get a mouse to run on a treadmill than it is to get that mouse to lift weights. You know, it's just not, if you could think of trying to convince a mouse to to do some like squats or curls. It's just like it's not as easy. So I think from that standpoint, it's just a lot easier for scientists to kind of like see what changes are happening in the brain after aerobic exercise. But I think that if anything, resistance training is going to be even better for you because you get that aerobic aspect to it, especially if you have like shorter rest times between your sets. But then also, it's one of the best ways to bolster metabolic health is to put more muscle on your body. In fact, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, she's a brilliant, she's a protein expert, super brilliant woman.
Muscle-centric medicine.
I love that. Yeah, I just love that term that I heard from her for the first time, which I think is really cool. So doing what you can to put on as much muscle as you can, super important. Boosts insulin sensitivity better than to my knowledge anything else. Having more muscle on your body allows for greater glucose disposal potential when you do eat the carbs and sugar that make their way onto your plate.
You're more resilient, more carb tolerant.
Yeah. Also, muscle produce myokines. BDNF is one of them, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So it's like sort of been referred to as the miracle grow protein that keeps your brain youthful, keeps it plastic.
Well, go into Alzheimer's connections to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So BDNF is reduced in Alzheimer's disease by, I believe it was about 50%. According to the Framingham Heart Study, I think they looked at BDNF and don't quote me on that, but yeah, BDNF, I believe BDNF is reduced by about 50%, which is sort of about the same degree of glucose metabolism deficit that you see in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. But basically, BDNF, it's this protein, it's a growth factor that promotes the survival of your existing neurons. So it protects your existing neurons and it promotes the growth of new ones. So neurogenesis in the brain's memory center, the hippocampus is all sort of encouraged and enabled by BDNF. And it seems to be expressed mostly when we stress our bodies, either via exercise or fasting, which is super interesting. So whatever that exercise modality is that you want to do, I think you should do it. I mean, again, the most of the bulk of the weight of the research is in favor of cardio, but I've seen studies that have shown that there's a upregulation of BDNF with yoga, with sitting in a sauna. Sitting in a sauna can boost BDNF as well.
It's tricky though. You can lift and get cardio too, right? Like sometimes you don't. If you're trying to get mass, you can do these big, powerful sets, but you can do longer sets and still get cardio. I don't know. I know that's like a subtlety, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, totally. I bought a jump rope also. I've been jumping rope and it's been great. So I'm not like a big proponent of like those long bouts of cardio, what Mark Sisson calls like chronic cardio. Instead, I think it's important to resistance train. I don't think people can hear that enough, especially when you zoom out and you look at the population at large. Like most people are not, like most people who need it most are not actually resistance training. And also, rather than do cardio, just incorporating more movement in your day. So non-exercise physical activity, I think is crucially important from the standpoint of brain health, from the standpoint of body composition. And that is just like anything that you do other than sitting on your couch watching Curb Your Enthusiasm reruns, which is like pretty much how I would choose to pass my time if I didn't realize the value of non-exercise physical activity.
I love that. Standing desks are huge.
You mentioned stressors, and I wanted to bring this concept up to you because I think this is how I present similar ideas that what you were talking about in Genius Life is so all these things that we're talking about, so fasting, high intensity HIIT training, I know you talked about like cold and heat therapy. They're all forms of acute stress on your body. And in America, a lot of what we're dealing with, and in the world, I guess, I like to focus on here because that's where I'm.
Yeah.
Is chronic stress, right? It's bills, it's work, it's long commutes, it's difficult relationships. Now it's a pandemic. It's all chronic, like pummeling stress. It suppresses you, right? And I think the way I was trained even is to let a patient rest, go on a vacation, go sit on the beach, you'll feel better. And that just doesn't work, right? And so everything that we're talking about and all these things that you preach, which I agree with, are actually acute stressors.
Yeah.
And it's by leveraging that stress and doing it thoughtfully, right? And not like, oh, I didn't eat all day. No, I thought about when I'm going to eat. I thought about what I'm going to eat. I thought about my workout. Am I going to put it at the end of my fast? Am I going to have a little snack before because I'm going to do a different kind of exercise? Like just being thoughtful about the stressors, you can leverage the stress to build your body through all sorts of mechanisms like hormesis. But what do you think about that as a concept? Like using stress to fight stress. Like, I just think that's so important for people to understand.
Oh, it's so important. In fact, I talk about that in The Genius Life, the value of that for helping us better cope with psychological stress. Like, as you mentioned, moving a sick loved one, working a job that you hate. By consciously engaging with acutely stressful activities, whether it's exercise or sauna or cold water immersion, you not only bolster your resilience to those stressors, but there's a spillover effect that occurs. So it actually boosts your resilience to stress across the board. It's literally called Crossadaptation, which is an amazing.
Did you come up with that?
It's in my book. I talk about it.
I know. I love that term. I heard it. Crossadaptation.
Crossadaptation.
So the idea that these physical stressors are making your brain and your sort of psyche more prepared for stress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's so powerful. In fact, I mentioned at the beginning how sick my mom was and how difficult for me it was during those 3 months when my mom was put on hospice care. If I didn't, it was easily the most stressful time of my life because of what my mom was going through, but because of all the family stress. There's just so much that goes on.
Just layering on top.
It just layers and layers and layers. It basically becomes what's called allostatic overload. It's basically like burnout. If I did not prioritize time for myself in those moments to get to the gym and continue to have the workouts that I know that my body needed, I don't know how I would have made it to the other side. Honestly, like it helped me in ways that I can't even describe. And so that's what I implore listeners to do. Like if they're experiencing stress, and we all experience stress, no matter who we are, and especially today, you've got to prioritize that time for self-care. You've got to make time in the day to get to the gym, to to do things that are uncomfortable, whether it's sitting in a sauna until you get uncomfortable, or taking a cold shower, or
What do you think about deep breathing?
Deep breathing? I'm into it. I mean, I've become really interested lately in just sort of nose breathing and what that does for you, which I think is super cool. I don't actually publicly talk about things until I've gone into them. I sort of have to discover things on my own for me to then get excited about them. And nose breathing is just one of those things that I like. People have been talking about in the health and wellness world for a long time, but I recently discovered it, and because I did, I'm now all about it. And it's just so interesting to me that I used to think that whether you breathe through your nose or your mouth, it was all just means to an end, right? Like getting air into your lungs. Like they're just holes on your face. And no matter which hole you choose to breathe from, it's the same net effect, right? But that's actually couldn't be further from the truth. So I think deep breathing through your nose is probably very beneficial because it activates it stimulates your vagus nerve, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and then also you generate nitric oxide, which I talked about earlier, in your paranasal sinus. So by just breathing more regularly through your nose, I think it's a really powerful health booster. There's no research on nose breathing as it pertains to Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or anything like that, but I would love to see that study.
Well, it translates well, where you can imagine if you're getting better quality or more air and all that stuff. And this actually translates into, I had a great podcast with Dr. Stephen Lin, who's a dentist, and he's a Weston Price kind of guy, and how the nasal face shape, the dental arches, the whole mouth and nose area is shaped is based on your nutrition, and how if you get it properly aligned, and there's even ways to fix that you will breathe better and that everything will be better. But
so cool.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, just before we move on, what does a nasal breathing exercise look like for you? Because I do deep breathing, and that like saved my life during some of the most difficult. I did some night shifts when I first finished my residency, and I was like all nights all the time, and it was screwing me up. My circadian rhythm was off. It was bad, right? And if it weren't for like kind of controlled hyperventilation, sort of Wim Hof strategy, I would not have been able to sleep. I would not have been able to work out. I couldn't like manage myself without being able to get a hold of my body. Like I think of it as like by doing that controlled hyperventilation, I'm able to control my nervous system. And I think a lot of people are familiar with that, but tell me about the nasal breathing. Like, what does that look like? Like, what does a session look like? Do you do it before a workout? Like,
no, I just try to do it. I just try to be really conscious now of when I'm mouth breathing, and I try to keep my mouth shut, and I try to just breathe through my nose. And I've talked about this on my Instagram, where I'm very active. I went to like my local drugstore and I bought those Breathe Right strips. And I've been wearing them. I wear them every night now to go to sleep. I don't snore, but I wear them anyway because it basically, to me, it literally is like one of the few things that to me actually is biohacking. Like the word biohacking is thrown about quite a bit, for things that aren't really biohacking. They're like hacking your environment. Breathe Right strips, though, by expanding your nasal airways, it's literally hacking your biology. You're like taking something and you're modifying it in a non-permanent way. And it helps you basically boost nasal airflow, which, if that's the rate limiting factor that affects nitric oxide production in your airways, then expanding your nostrils, I think dilating your nostrils is going to be, is going to have a health effect. And they've done a number of studies where they find that, it's sort of inconsistent as to whether or not it can boost physical performance. But I find that I sleep like a baby, and I'm already a good sleeper, but I feel that I've had like a noticeable improvement in my sleep since wearing these Breathe Right strips. I've also started mouth taping, which, you can or can't do, but just in general, just putting those on. And then I keep them on after I wake up. I don't rip them off as soon as I wake up. I'll like keep them on. I'll keep breathing through my nose. I'll, take a few deep breaths in the morning, just to sort of get the blood flow going. I've even worn them boxing. Like I've worn them while exercising, and I find it to be super helpful. So there's no real like routine or practice associated with it. I just try to breathe through my nose as much as I can. Cause I feel like air through your nose, it's like, it's providing a type of nutrient in a way. So thinking about it that way, it's just a powerful like motivator.
I like it. And yeah, what I was going to get onto is just the cold and hot therapy, because we bring it up a lot, but we haven't gotten into that many of the details yet. So I know you wrote about it, so maybe you could just give a little more of the science behind why the cold and the hot therapy is actually good for you.
Yeah, good question. And it goes back to the acute stressors. There's a lot of really cool research coming out of the University of Eastern Finland now showing us that there's a very large ongoing heart study that's sort of centered at the University of Eastern Finland. And what they're finding is that people who regularly use saunas have a pretty dramatic risk reduction for hypertension, for stroke, for cardiovascular disease, and for dementia. And this is an observational study, so correlation doesn't equal causation. But I think it's worth paying attention to, because if you were Finland is the sauna capital of the world, right? They have on average one sauna per household there.
What?
Yeah. It's sauna is a Finnish word.
Sauna. Huh.
And if you were to do that study here, I think it probably wouldn't be very reliable, because you'd have a strong health user bias, right? Like people who have access to saunas in the United States have access to gyms. Maybe they're more affluent. They've got more leisure time. But in Finland, taking a sauna is like taking a shower. And so, I think it's really interesting that they see such a strong dose response curve there. The more you sauna, 4 to 7 times per week, seems to be associated with the most robust health benefit.
How many minutes?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head how many minutes, but generally I would assume my assumption would be that it's like a leisure time thing. It's like an hour. They go in for like an hour, and they're in and out.
In and out, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere, don't quote me on it, is somewhere like 10 minutes feels good, 15 minutes starting to cook, and then at 20 minutes, you're starting to see some of the health benefits. I don't know where I read that though. Maybe I'm making that up. Is that no? Maybe not.
Well, no, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's different studies. Like in the States, there have been a number of studies that look at, for example, how sauna affects neurochemistry. So they'll put users in a sauna. Generally, it's like those 20-minute intervals. 20 minutes in the sauna, 15-minute cool off, 20 minutes in the sauna. I don't know if that's necessarily representative of like how Finns do it. You know, as a sauna enthusiast, when I use the sauna, for me, it's like an hour-long affair. You know, I'm like in it for 20, 30 minutes. I get out, you know, maybe I'll take a cold shower or do cold plunge, and then I go back in. So yeah, I don't exactly know. They probably mention it in the papers, but yeah, what we know is that saunas act like an aerobic exercise mimetic. You know, your pulse increases. You actually also see a robust increase in nitric oxide when you sit in a sauna. It does a lot of the things that taking a jog do for you, and as I mentioned, boosts BDNF. So these are all things that I think can help the brain.
And then what about cold?
Cold is a little bit. I mean, there's similarities, right? There's like all of these acute stressors. They have sort of, you know, there's like overlapping aspects to them, and then there are aspects that are unique. So cold immersion, you actually activate also heat shock protein, some of the same things that happen when you're sitting in a sauna. But I think that cold is a lot more interesting from a metabolic health standpoint. I think they both can boost metabolic health, but in terms of activating your body's brown adipose tissue, brown fat, cold really is like the one modality that seems to stoke those pathways in the body. So you accumulate what's called brown fat up and down your spine, around your collarbone, in your armpits. And for a long time, it was thought that brown fat wasn't something that that adults took with them. You know, brown fat is something that you'll see a lot of in babies. Babies can't actually shiver. And shivering is a way to sort of warm up your body, right? But a baby is unable to do that. And so they have this fat tissue that basically its sole job is to generate heat. And in doing so, it burns calories, you know, sugar, fats, and things like that. But yeah, now we know that not only do adults have brown fat, but we can actually encourage the proliferation of brown fat in our bodies by just exposing ourselves more frequently to cooler temperatures. So sitting in cold water, I mean, it's great for mental acuity. It's great for mental health. All those, you know, all of the benefits, you know, that you get from just like acute stress are there, but then you're also sort of turning on that brown fat and you're encouraging its proliferation, which can boost insulin sensitivity, can boost, you know, glucose uptake into muscle tissue. And then even ambient cold has been shown to do really wonderful things for metabolic health. Like there's a study that I cite in Genius Foods where they took patients who had type 2 diabetes, and without making any other modifications to their diet or their lifestyles, like they didn't add exercise, they didn't put them on low carb diets. All they did was tell them to sleep overnight for I believe it was 2 weeks. It was between 2 and 4 weeks, in basically the lab, where they kept the temperature overnight at like, I believe it was like 60 degrees, 60 or 66 degrees, something like that. I cite it in my book. And they found that based on that, making no other changes to their diet and lifestyle, that they saw a 25% improvement in their insulin sensitivity, which is amazing.
Wow. Well, the brown fat's a more metabolically active tissue, down to the mitochondria. And, you know, it's funny, my friends made fun of me for this because I would take walks all winter. I mean, not that it's cold in LA, but I'd wear like almost nothing, just, you know, no shoes, no long sleeves, and walk my dog. And I got used to the cold weather. And I think I was saying this is like free cold therapy. I'm not going to go to a cryo chamber and, you know, I mean, obviously it'd be better if I probably went there. But I mean, if I walk around for 30 minutes and 60 degrees, that's got to do something.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I hate being cold.
But I remember reading about it, and even just taking like a ice cold rag and putting it on the nape of your neck and leaving it there for 20 or 30 minutes increased the brown fat.
That's awesome.
I can't remember the study, but I remember reading it and being like, yeah, it doesn't take a lot. Similarly to what you were saying, even just sleeping in a colder environment for your body to start adapting to that acute stress.
Yeah, so cool. Yeah, I hate cold, and I would, I never would allow myself to experience cold. I would always, grab a sweater. Even like the most remote sense of feeling chilly would cause me to, I'd reach for a jacket or something. But now I embrace it. Like if I'm walking around and I'm, say I'm in Costco and I walk into like one of those big refrigerated rooms that they have, I'll like linger for a few extra seconds in those rooms, even though I hate it, but I'll do it because I know that it's good for me. It's like one of those acute stresses.
Something that you're saying, and I want to like emphasize, a lot of this stuff, and I agree with you, it doesn't feel good. We hate it, especially like that first cold winter day and you go out there, you're like, this is cold.
Yeah.
That first run when you've been off the wagon for a few weeks or months or whatever, even that first lift doesn't feel so good when you've not been at it. That first fast when you've like been pigging out all weekend, it doesn't feel so good. That's the point.
Yeah.
You do the stuff that you don't want to do. You do the stuff that doesn't feel good so that you can feel good.
Yeah.
And I think that's this like mental trick that people really need to be a genius. You got to realize that you got to be uncomfortable. Like you have to do the shit you don't want to do.
We can do it acutely. The great part is if you acutely are uncomfortable, you can be comfortable long term. But most people do the opposite. So they're chronically comfortable and then they're actually chronically messed up.
And I think that a lot of the brain disease that we see, and so I do primary care, preventative care, call it lifestyle medicine, call it integrative medicine a few days a week. I obviously talk about it here, and then I do this hospice work. And what I notice with the hospice work and I do like elderly care, right, is that there's just, and you can look this up, the rates of brain disease are skyrocketing. And I think so much of that is that as we get older, we sort of coddle the person. Oh, they're like not eating. Let me give them something that's really palatable, which is usually like a processed refined grain or some kind of sweet.
Lucerna shake.
Yeah, we don't push them physically because we're afraid of this or that. It's all about comfort-seeking behavior. And I think that just accelerates the degradation of the person. The people that I see that are like vibrant in their 80s and 90s are constantly stressing themselves out. Not stressing themselves out with work or some chronic stress, but these like lifestyle. And I do call them biohacks because in this bizarro 2020 world we've created, they're hacks because no one does these things that, as a Russian person, like my parents grew up telling me about guys going into the ice cold lake. And I'm like, that's crazy. They were making themselves healthy, again, in that culture, like you go into the sauna and you take these leaves and have you guys ever seen this? It's
Banya, yeah.
Banya. And you take these leaves and you smash them against the back and it like hurts, but it feels good. And it produces all this blood flow and you get elated from it. These are all archaic, like ancestral ideas that have been around forever. And we've just completely forgot about them. And it's really, really, really hurting our elderly population. And I think that's like not talked about. We throw drugs. And whenever you talk about an intervention like we're talking about, it's always in the setting of health and wellness. It's not like treating an elderly person who's rapidly decompensating. And so there's been multiple times, and I've talked to Brian about this, where I'm like the person's getting worse. And I'm like, well, what about just putting them on a very, very low carb diet and see if like therapeutic ketosis will improve their cognitive function? Because it's certainly worth a try. It's free.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the resistance I experience, I'm like, oh, you're crazy. And it's like, really? Mm-hmm. It's really sad to me. So I'm curious if, when I know your situation was different because there's a malignancy, but were you privy to all this stuff when you were going through your thing with your family? Or was this even, did that go through your mind? Like, oh, what kind of lifestyle changes? Or was it already like, nah,
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I was certainly aware of all this stuff, but what I realized is that when you're dealing with a sick loved one, I would certainly encourage you to teach, to attempt to teach, but to do so gently, because Ultimately, people live the way that they want to live. And especially somebody dealing with a chronic illness, a terminal illness, quality of life becomes so constrained that I got to be honest, when I was, those last 3 months, I was making regular trips to my mom's favorite pastry store in New York City to buy her, whatever she would eat, because at that point, what you need for the patient are calories, right? So it's not, you're past macros at that point. You're just trying to get enough energy in that person so that they don't die tomorrow, and to make my mom happy, to like give my mom like whatever last bit of joy and pleasure she'd be able to experience in this life. And so no, I if you would have asked me prior to going through that experience, what I would do if I could project and think, how I would handle the situation were my mom to have that kind of illness, I would say, oh yeah, I would put my mom on a ketogenic diet and blah, 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 blah. And, I'd try all these different things. But, having experienced that, I'm like, whoa, no, you gotta, your relationship with that patient, their quality of life, that's the most, by far, the most important thing. Now, if it was me, yeah, I would try all those different things, and I'm entitled to try all those different things.
And this was my point exactly. End of life, hospice, when you're in the situation you guys were in, it's about comfort.
Yeah.
It's about finding joy and happiness and venerating like the life that you've had and the time you have together. The interesting intervention for me is a lot of this stuff in an elderly person that's not at the end of their life.
Yeah.
Someone in their 60s and 70s that's got these things, and you see the brain disease starting to creep in. It's called mild cognitive impairment, when you start seeing memory issues and like decision-making problems, right? I've never seen it. I don't know that there's any studies, but that's where I would love to see like a dramatic sapient/genius lifestyle change, and see if you can't pull the brain function back. You can't, change that brain chemistry and fire up those cells. I don't know of any studies.
Well, Dr. Dale Bredesen, they are doing something.
They're doing them, right?
Yeah. And if you know about more, but I mean, that would be where we could go with this to end it off here, is what can people do to just either cut it off at the pass, or if you already have it, at least slow it down?
Yeah, I mean, I think exercise is probably the number one disease-modifying treatment that we have. Even now, the American Academy of Neurology has approved the use of exercise as a way to prevent mild cognitive impairment. Or I believe it was either prevent mild cognitive impairment or prevent the progression of mild cognitive impairment from converting to more severe forms of cognitive impairment. We know that keeping a healthy blood pressure can help prevent MCI. And they've shown this with pharmaceutical drugs, with blood pressure lowering drugs, but we know that exercise works just as well at lowering your blood pressure as pharmaceuticals. So I would say for that, one more point for exercise. And then having a healthy diet, avoiding the ultra-processed foods, the refined grains, the processed grain and seed oils. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that those are not very beneficial to brain health. I mean, if you consider the fact that your brain is composed primarily of polyunsaturated fat, right? I mean, DHA fat and arachidonic acid, right? An omega-6 fat. These fats are very vulnerable and prone to oxidation. Your brain is full of antioxidants, right? It keeps vitamin E up in there and glutathione. It's like, but that's the reason why your brain is such a crucible for oxidative stress, because it's an organ that's comprised of these very delicate and damage-prone fats that utilizes 25% of your oxygen, right? 25% of your resting metabolic rate is used to create energy in your brain, and it's compressed to an organ the size of a grapefruit. So it's like there's all that activity in there, and it's made of these very delicate and damage-prone fats. When you consume soybean oil or grapeseed oil or canola oil, you're consuming basically the same kinds of fats that your brain is made up of. So they have, a hall pass to your brain. And by the time you consume them, they're already damaged because of the production process. And they're stripped of antioxidants that would otherwise protect those fats and protect your brain. So I think it's a recipe for disaster. And those are the kinds of fats that I grew up consuming and that my mom consumed for, most of her life. So getting rid of those. And then Also, eating the grass-fed beef, eating the wild fatty fish, eating the dark leafy greens, things like that, I think all could go a long way towards preventing these conditions. I mean, the best sort of evidence that we have in terms of a dietary pattern that prevents dementia, it's sort of a modification of the Mediterranean diet. It's called the MIND diet. And I don't think that the MIND diet is perfect by any means. It's sort of a combination of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet, which is sort of a government-funded diet that stops hypertension. You guys are familiar with it, right? None of these diets are like gospel, right? They're just kind of like what has been scraped together with a little bit of epidemiology, with a little bit of like government funding. So I think eating and living in a way that's going to keep your blood pressure healthy, it's going to keep your blood sugar healthy, it's going to keep your insulin low. I mean, that to me is the diet that and is going to provide the kinds of micronutrients and antioxidants and raw materials that your brain requires to grow new brain cells and stay healthy as it ages. That to me is the dietary pattern that's going to be the win. And to me, that's a diet that's, that includes grass-fed red meat, that includes lots of seafood, dark leafy greens, low sugar fruits, even moderate sugar fruits, whole fruits, things like that, and stays away as best you can the ultra processed foods. So I guess it's not rocket science, but the fact that the diet and the lifestyle of the typical person today has deviated so far from that. That's why, to me, it's no surprise that we're seeing the skyrocketing rates that you said that we're seeing.
Well, yeah, we're telling people it's boring and simple advice, and we have 100% alignment with that with the Sapien diet, is what you just said. But it's hard for people to do, and no one does it, like you said. And this is what we used to do. We're not saying anything new, really. We're like, this is how humans ate. We didn't have processed seed oils and tons of refined grains and sugars. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's great advice. It's not sexy advice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not sexy, but I mean, it can be, like shopping around the perimeter of your supermarket. It's going to make you look your best. It's going to make you feel your best. So I think that it can be, and it's,
you feel it, yeah.
and it puts the ball in your court, which I think is the greatest thing, the greatest aspect of it, of all. And that's that it's a diet that's going to give you the best chance to live a long and healthy life, which is unfortunately today a privilege afforded to the few. So few of us actually get that in the Western world. We're staying sick for a really long time. We're dying young.
Well, I think it's the long, healthy life.
Yeah,
I see so many people that are just sick in their 60s and then survive for 30 more years sick. And that's just what I don't want for people. I don't want to normalize obesity. I don't want to normalize illness. I don't want to normalize these sick people, these older people, like falling apart in nursing homes and us just ignoring them. And I think that's something that we have never talked about on our podcast. And, this situation really, I want everyone to remember that when the older person, your grandparents go to the nursing home, don't forget about them.
Yeah.
Let's show some love to the older people in this country. I really, we're not going to get into it on this podcast, but so much of what's going on in this current situation with the pandemic, it is not healthy for older people. We're quote unquote protecting them when we're really expediting their demise and decreasing the quality of life that they do have. I think it's gonna the evidence will pan out once all the once the political stuff goes to the side, we will see the truth. And the truth is we're not doing a good job. We're not doing a good job. And we would do a good job if we cared about people's lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And that's what, obviously you preach in your book, and we're going to keep beating it because people really need to grasp the importance of lifestyle, that you don't need to feel crappy. You can feel good, and it's free.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Normalize feeling good.
Mm-hmm. Normalize feeling good.
Yeah, I like that. I like that term, normalize. People just love to throw that around these days. But normalize feeling good. Normalize muscle. Normalize healthy fats. Normalize
sleeping well.
Whole foods. Normalize sleeping well. Normalize all that stuff. And I think ultimately that's what's going to help society pull through. You know, my friend Sal DiStefano up at Mind Pump, he talks about this stuff a lot. Like the best thing that you can do for society is really to like put your own oxygen mask on first. And in doing, you know, in saying that, he means like take care of yourself, like get yourself healthy, you know, get yourself like mentally robust and resilient and physically robust and resilient. That's going to reflect outward to everything else that you do.
Speaking of that, something that like pisses some people off, but I'm a big, I found a connection with Ayn Rand. I don't know if you guys know, she's a
I like her.
Political thinker and wrote some beautiful books. And she popularized this idea of like being selfish is the way you're going to like benefit society the most. And I think that it sounds bad to be selfish, but that's what you're saying. Take care of yourself. Put yourself first so that you can be there for everyone else. So we take care of ourselves so we could go on this podcast and be a representation of good health, right? I don't want to be the fat doctor. And I'm sorry, but that's a lot of my colleagues. Like they're not healthy. They don't take care of themselves. And then they go and tell you what to eat and how to do. And here's some pills. No, I want to hold my people in my profession to a higher standard. And that's why I end up having more communications with engineers and authors and other people that aren't, because in medicine, we don't really put the onus on ourselves. And I think that this community that you guys are a part of, this like health wellness community, low carb, ancestral health, whatever word you want to use, it's people putting themselves on display. Like, look, I do this, I'm crushing it. You can crush it right along with me. And I want more doctors to do it, because ultimately there's a lot of people and they need to hear this message. And we need 20 maxes. We need 100 maxes. We need 100 Brians. We need we need more and more and more to make a dent in this disastrous health situation we're in America.
Amen.
We got to go out on that. There actually is good data. There's a study about Alzheimer's and how there's way more increase in deaths during this lockdown.
Oh man, I'm sure it's coming.
Maybe we can link to that in the show notes. But it is taking a toll. These people, dementia or Alzheimer's, I forget the study, but it's there. It's bad news. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram at Max Lugavere, Lugavere. I have a podcast. It's called The Genius Life, and my 2 books are Genius Foods and also The Genius Life. So I'm easy to find. Come say hi.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming in, and we're neighbors in Venice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks Brian.
Max.
Thanks, Dr. Gary.
Thanks, Max.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Check out the new products at nosetotale.org. You got to get these cool hats while they last. I didn't make that many of each style. The seasonings are a must for any meat eater. And the beef tallow skincare products. Throw away all your skincare products and just use natural beef with very simple ingredients. I'm telling you, they're great. I've been using them for months. Also, give the podcast a review on iTunes or the podcast app. Share it with friends and family. Start back at episode 1. Go to sapien.org to find out about everything else. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week.